Hello, welcome back to another first and favourites video, and today I am talking tropes. I've already done a few first and favourite videos, and these are a series of videos where I talk about the very first book that I read with a particular author, subgenre, trope, and then basically I tell you which is my favourite. Now, as a caveat to all of these, it's not necessarily the very first book that I ever read, but it's the first book that I can either remember reading or since I've been recording the books that I've been reading since the back end of 2020. So far I have done my first and favourite authors, my first and favourite subgenres parts 1 and 2, and my first and favourites mafia romance edition. Today, like I said, I am talking my first and favourite tropes, and I've specifically got 8 tropes to talk about today. I'm tentatively calling this part 1 because there are loads of tropes out there, and I'll potentially make a part 2 in the future with different tropes. Right now I don't know what those tropes will be, so if you have got any ideas of first and favourites that you would like me to share in any particular tropes that aren't mentioned in this video, then please let me know in the comment section down below and I'll be happy to put that video together. Okay, so let's get straight into the very first trope that I want to talk about today, and that is age gap romances. Now, the first age gap I read was actually a reverse age gap, and this was High Risk Rookie by Odette Stone, and this one is book 4 in the Vancouver Wolves series. So this isn't a sports romance, it's an ice hockey romance. And in fact, it's our ice hockey player who is the younger of these two characters. We are following Levi. He is the high-risk rookie, basically. He is new to ice hockey. He is fantastic at the sport, but he has a bit of a reputation, isn't particularly reliable, and therefore is currently sort of between teams. And as a result, he is surfing down in Mexico with friends. Then we have Krista, who is our older woman. She is actually a sports agent, and basically she is asked to do a favour by the GM of the Vancouver Wolves to go to Mexico and pick up Levi and you know, check him out, look him over. The GM of the Vancouver Wolves thinks he's got some great talent and he really wants him to get himself a good agent, and so, like I say, he asked Krista to do this favour and go down to Mexico, check him out, and if she thinks he's good, to sign him up for a potential to play for the Vancouver Wolves. And so that's what she does. Of course, when she goes down to Mexico, they are very attracted to each other. One thing leads to another, and they do spend the night together. In fact, there is a consequence of that night together that will come back to haunt them later on in the story. But she does recognise his talent, does sign him as an agent, and then he does come to play for the Vancouver Wolves. Of course, from a professional perspective, she wants to keep their relationship on the down low because she's never dated a client before, and so this is also going to lead to a little bit of an issue between this couple. But overall, I really like Odette Stone's writing, and I really love her Vancouver Wolves series, so would definitely recommend this one and tell you to give it a go. In terms of my favourite age gap romance though, I think, like I say, I have read quite a lot, but the one that I really did enjoy was Don't Kiss a Bride by Carian, and I think this is like a true age gap romance where the female character in here is Skylar. She's just 18 and the hero in this one is Jude, or Lucky as some people call him, who's in his 30s. So there is quite a big age gap, about a 15-year age gap between these two, and of course it is sort of very taboo, but Carian does a fantastic job, I think, of you know, navigating some difficult topics when it comes to these types of age gaps, and you know, kind of like the power dynamic between couples, particularly when, you know, the hero is much older than the heroine and she is in a very vulnerable position to start. But it was super believable. The chemistry between these two is amazing, and you're absolutely rooting for them from the very first page. So like I said, we're following Jude and Skylar, and Skylar is really struggling. She lives with her mum and she's in her final year of school, but her mum has a mental illness, and she is also a hoarder, so bad that the whole house is completely filled with basically junk that her mother keeps purchasing and filling the house with. And so the only kind of like safe place that Skylar has is her bedroom, which she keeps locked, and the only way she can get to her bedroom is by climbing into the window, basically. So she kind of has to kind of like, you know, keep her whole room clean, but it also means that she doesn't really have proper access to you know, the kitchen or the bathroom, and so she finds herself in a situation where she showers at school, and she has to live on very, like, you know, reduced meals, shall we say, things that she can just keep in her fridge, cook for herself. But over the years she's also developed an eating disorder because when she was little, again, her mother really didn't look after her properly, and a lot of the food in the house was often rotten, and so as a result she got very sick when she was younger eating this rotten food, and now she's developed this eating order, so she really struggles to eat. As a result, her diet is not great, and she is suffering from some health issues because of this as well. But of course she's in a situation where she's still at school, she's got a job but she doesn't earn a lot of money, her mum keeps hoarding and all of that, and so she doesn't really have any money to pay for her medical bills in order to try and sort some of the health issues out that she's got. And this is where Jude really comes into the equation, because he owns his own construction company. He happens to be working on a house near to the school where Skylar goes to school, and basically he sees her on multiple occasions and helps her out on multiple occasions. For example, when a car breaks down, he gives her a lift. When he sees her faint on the pavement, he picks her up and takes her to the hospital, and eventually he starts to figure out what her home life is actually like, all the things that she's going through, the support that she needs, and he hatches this crazy plan and suggests to her that they get married. It will be completely platonic, but he'll give her a safe place to live in his house. She'll have her own room, and also it will give her access to his medical insurance, which basically means she can get the health care that she needs. And so this is then follows their story of when they then do get married, start living together, they're in close proximity together and start to form this very, very powerful friendship. But also, like I said, their chemistry as well is off the charts, and it's not going to be too long before they start to have deeper feelings for each other and start their relationship. But of course Jude is going to harbour quite a lot of you know, doubts and guilt about you know, loving someone so young, and all of those questions about whether or not he's taken advantage of her, and all of that sort of good stuff. So quite an angsty read in a way, but absolutely fantastic. Loved it and would definitely recommend. So the next trope I want to talk about today is Enemies to Lovers, and the first one that I recorded reading was Consume by Jessica Prince. I've talked about this series quite a lot. This is book 3 in the Civil Corruption series. It's a pop star kind of romance series, and in this particular one we're following Killian and Gina. It's Enemies to Lovers because Gina and Killian really don't get on. Gina is kind of best friends with one of the heroines from book 1, and since he first laid eyes on her, he kind of has taken an instant dislike to her, is always really, really antagonistic towards her, and just really, really is not a nice person. But Gina, for the most part, has been able to avoid him until the band themselves are in need of a new assistant, and they offer Gina the job. Now Killian is not happy that Gina's been offered the job, and he decides that he's going to try and make her life a misery then, and it's just really horrible to her in the workplace environment as well, and when they go on tour and everything, in the hopes that he'll be so horrible that she'll decide that she's going to leave, and then not work in the band anymore. So this is really the enemies to lovers sort of element to this story. But of course the main reason that Killian dislikes Gina is because he's really, really attracted to her. So the standard sort of, you know, bully tactic from a boy who's just like pulling a girl's hair to get her attention, because Gina really gets under his skin, and he's quite angry about that. Of course, because of the way Killian treats Gina, Gina is also gives as good as she gets, and doesn't particularly like Killian to start off with. But again, the chemistry is undeniable, and eventually they kind of figure things out and you know, turn from enemies to lovers. In terms of my favourites then, I've actually got 2 books that I want to talk about. They're recent reads, and I like them for very different reasons. So the first one is God of War by Rina Kent. This is book 6 in the Legacy of the Gods series. Now when I was going through my list of all the books I'd read with the enemies to lovers trope, this was one of my 5-star reads in this category. It is an absolutely fantastic book, but the reason then I'm going to give you a second book is because although this is a 5-star read for sure, it's not necessarily the sort of book that you would want to read more than once, because it is, you know, deals with a lot of difficult subject matter, and it doesn't necessarily leave you feeling too great for the majority of the read. And that's because we're following Eli and Ava. So if you've been reading any of the Legacy of the Gods series, you'll know that Eli and Ava have been pretty much at odds with each other from the very first book. They're definitely enemies to lovers. We don't know what their situation is, but we pretty much have a good vibe that something happened when they were younger. Maybe Ava propositioned Eli, he turned her down, and there's definitely some sort of animosity between them. As this book starts, basically, it starts where Eli and Ava are actually married, and she wakes up in a hospital room where she finds out that she's been married to Eli for a number of years, and she's got about 5 years of memory that is missing. So this is like an amnesia romance as well as a bit of a forced marriage. And as we go through the story, we start to figure out what happened, why they ended up getting married, and why Ava agreed to this marriage, and why she's sort of still with him, and Eli's motivations as well. There's a lot of, like I say, there's a lot of dark content here that gets unpicked, but I was absolutely enthralled by this story. I couldn't put it down. Eli and Ava are a great couple together, and once they figure things out and they get to the end, they do get their HEA, but they've got a very difficult road to travel. And what I will say about Eli is that he is one of those kind of heroes that doesn't pander to the heroine. He does, it's very obvious from the beginning that he cares about her deeply, but he is going to make sure that she is safe by tough love. So he's going to be cruel to be kind, basically. Ava really struggles with his cruelness in a way, but like I said, he's absolutely doing it for her best interest, and he's probably the only one that is trying to do the right thing by her, and hence why he's kind of forced her into this marriage. But I won't say any more than that. I have talked about it before, but if you haven't read the series, I highly recommend it. It's fantastic, and it's a great ending to the series. So something then on a bit of a lighter note, another Enemies to Lovers, which I absolutely loved as I was reading it. This is a feel-good sort of factor book, and definitely something I'll be reading again, and that's Brutal Prince by Sophie Lark. This is a mafia romance, and this is book 1 in her Brutal Birthright series. In this one, we are following Callum and Ada. Now, this is a true Enemies to Lovers because they are both part of mafia families that are at odds with each other, so they're kind of rival mafia families, and Callum and Ada in particular do not like each other. This book starts out where Ada pretty much crashes Callum's party, sets fire to his library, steals his grandfather's pocket watch, and ends up discarding it into the ocean. Of course, Callum then absolutely wants to retaliate. To stop the war, though, to stop this, snowballing into something much greater, the two families get together and they say, we need to put a stop to this. In fact, the best thing we can do is force these two to get married to each other, and then they can't fight anymore, and, we'll put a stop to it, basically. So Callum and Ada and then are forced into this arranged marriage, and then the antics between them just carry on from there. They're always trying to get one up on each other. And there's a very famous, the reason why there's strawberries on here, there's a very famous scene in here, people talk about it all the time. Callum is severely allergic to strawberries, and to get back at him, to ruin the wedding day, Ada makes sure that she eats lots of strawberries before the wedding ceremony, so that when he gets to kiss the bride, he ends up going into anaphylactic shock and is rushed off to the hospital. And of course, that is a very serious thing to do, and would not advocate that in real life, but in this book it was extremely sort of funny, and it, like I say, very tit for tat. And then he goes on to retaliate against her in kind, and there's lots of great hate sex in here until they figure out actually they can work together to solve some of their other issues, and they finally get their HEA. But yeah, a great fun read, and would highly recommend if you're looking for an Enemies to Lovers romance. Next up then, probably one of my favourite tropes of all time, and that's fake dating. I love a fake dating romance. And the first book I want to talk about is Seducing Lola by Jessica Prince, which is book 1 in the Girl Talk series. We're following Grayson and Lola. Now, not only is this a fake dating romance, but it's also kind of like a billionaire romance, a workplace romance, and it's definitely a rom-com. There are some really funny moments in this one. There's some scenes that are still, even though I read this book, you know, 4 years ago, I still absolutely remember some of these scenes and still kind of laugh. And I literally laughed out loud when I was reading them. Essentially, Lola works for a radio station, and she and a couple of friends have this show called Girl Talk where people ring in and they kind of give a relationship advice. Grayson is actually kind of like the owner of this media company that happens to own this radio station. So technically he is her boss, although he's very hands-off. He owns a lot of media things, and this radio station and this show is just one small part. The thing is, Grayson bumps into Lola in a coffee shop at the start of this book. She actually spills coffee on him. They have a bit of a meet cute, and then she happens to talk about him on the Girl Talk show, and then people then figure out that she's talking about Grayson, and then there's a big PR issue, and then the PR team suggests that they fake date and go on some dates together, so that the press doesn't take this any further, and you know, they can show that it was all a bit of a joke. You know, Lola's pretty much threatened that if she doesn't go ahead with this, then her job could potentially be at risk. So of course she agrees, and then they have to go to kind of events and things together like that, and things go from there. Then in terms of my favourite fake dating, I think it has to be The Deal by Elle. Now there's loads of books that I could throw in here, and surprisingly quite a few of them are sports romances, which you'll find out because in a couple of weeks time I'll be releasing an updated fake dating romance recommendations video, and you'll see in there that the majority of books I talk about are actually sports romances and quite a few ice hockey romances as well. So it seems to be a perfect pairing, ice hockey and fake dating, and The Deal by Elle is no different. You probably heard about this one already. It's quite an old book now. A lot of people love this book, but this is book 1 in the off-campus series, and of course we are following Hannah and Garrett. Garrett is our ice hockey player. His dad was a professional ice hockey player as well, so he's very good at the sport, and you know, he's in college and is looking to turn professional. And then basically we have Hannah, who happens to go to the same college as him. Now, what basically happens in this book is that Hannah is really good at a class that Garrett is struggling in, and he needs to maintain his grade point average in order to continue to play on the ice hockey team. So he approaches Hannah and asks her if she will tutor him and help him with the class. And at first she turns him down because she's got a very heavy course workload, and she doesn't have time for him, and she's not really interested in the local jocks, particularly the ice hockey team, so she turns him down. But Garrett is very persistent, so he starts to find out a little bit more about her to see if he can get a bit of leverage on her, and he realises that she has been trying to date a football player. So he then offers her a deal. He's like, hey, I've been paying attention. I see you've got a crush on the football player. He doesn't seem that interested in you, but if you date me, then he will have more interest in you because I'm so popular that I'll make you popular, and then everybody, all the men at the school want to date you after that. And so she reluctantly agrees to this deal, where she's going to basically help him with his class, and he's going to help her with her reputation around college and bag her a date with this football player. Of course, then they spend a lot more time together. They're in close proximity together, and eventually this fake dating situation also turns into a sex education lesson because we figure some things out about Hannah. She reveals a lot of her past to Garrett. It's not particularly a nice past, so check your trigger warnings before you go into this one. But Garrett absolutely helps her through some of those issues that she has, and helps her in the bedroom, and of course once they start sleeping together, she's going to very quickly stop thinking about the football player and want to be with Garrett for real. Next up, I've got Fated Mates. So I read a book called Her Fairy King by Bianca Cole. This was book 1 in the Mated and Claimed series, and it's a paranormal royalty specifically focused on fae, so fairies. We are following Flynn and Lucy, and basically the idea is that these fae creatures come out on the summer solstice. It's the one time of the year where they come to party, they mingle with all the other fae, and they are supposed to be able to find their fated mates, because if they're in close proximity to one of their fated mates, basically they will be drawn to them, and then they will, you know, be able to be with each other and all of that good stuff. the summer solstice happens, and Flynn, he is kind of like the king of the Fae, if you like, so he's royalty, and he definitely starts to sense that his fated mate is nearby. So he follows the scent, the trail, as it were, but it takes him out of the camp and into a nearby human village, and into the house of Lucy, who's a human. Now, when he realizes that his fated mate is a human, he's not too happy at first, because this is a pretty taboo in the Fae community. You're not supposed to be with humans, they're not supposed to know about the Fae, but also potentially this will be a weakness for him, because after all he is royalty, and does he really want to be saddling himself with a human? But of course they're fated mates, so they're not going to be able to resist being together, and Lucy is drawn into this sort of fated mate world. In terms of my favourite fated mates romance, this is not necessarily a traditional fated mates like a Megaverse or anything like that, but definitely consider this couple fated mates, and that is Rest in the Witch Face by Juliette Cross, and this is book 5 in her Stay a Spell series. Now, this particular copy of this book is a limited edition hard copy that she did as a Kickstarter last year. It is signed inside, and it also came with some artwork as well, and this fantastic artwork of the two main characters in the story, Jules and Ruben. So this is also a paranormal romance, and Jules is a witch. In fact, she is the High Witch for the New Orleans sort of coven, and she is head of the paranormal community in New Orleans. And Ruben, who is the head of the vampires, also in New Orleans, so works very closely with Jules. Now, throughout this whole series, we've met Jules and Ruben. We knew something had gone on between them about 12 years before, but for whatever reason, Jules broke up with Ruben, and they haven't really got on since. And although Ruben hasn't given up on her, he absolutely loved her from day one, and he has been pursuing her relentlessly for 12 years, basically biding his time until they can get back together. Jules has been very much keeping him at a distance, not being particularly nice to him. But as we go into book 1, we start to need Ruben's help a little bit more in every single book as we lead up to book 5, and by the time we get to book 5, Jules really does need Ruben's support for them to go on a bit of a road trip to gather some support from the other commons in America, and eventually they travel to the UK as well, because they're trying to get equal rights for werewolves in the paranormal community. And then this book not only is sort of fated mates, because these two are destined to be together, but it's also kind of a road trip romance as well, close proximity, and only one bed trope, or only one bedroom trope in this one as well, because obviously on their road trip they're going to have to stop at a hotel to find that there's only one room left available. I absolutely love this one. It had all of the elements of a paranormal story I enjoy. Obviously witches and vampires, absolutely yummy. This relationship between Jules and Ruben has really been building for the previous sort of 4 books, and by the time we get to this one, we're absolutely ready to figure out what happened between them and work out a way these two are going to get together. And when they finally do get together, their chemistry is electric. They are so great together. They're such a great couple. And also there's an edge of danger and suspense in this one as well, because there's some people that don't want them to achieve their goals, and they might find themselves in a bit of danger. So I think this book had everything that you could possibly want in a paranormal romance, but also a fantastic relationship between Jules and Ruben, and I would highly recommend. So next up then we have single parent romance, and the first one that I read was Mountain Struggle by J.R. Pace, and this is Mont Blanc Rescue book 1. Now this book is kind of a romantic suspense. It's set in a village called Chamonix in the French Alps, and in this one we are following Damien and Tess. Now Damien is basically a seasoned mountaineer. In fact, he owns a company specifically who are there to, like, for mountain rescue. So he basically owns this company where if people get into trouble on the mountain, basically his team will go out and you know, rescue stranded hikers and that sort of thing. And he is our single dad in this one. And then we have Tess, who is hired to be a nanny to Damien's little boy, who is called Jamie, and he's just 6 years old. So this is a great mix again of, you know, it's a single parent. We've got a great relationship between the nanny and Jamie, the little boy. And also, like I said, it's romantic suspense, because ultimately you can figure out that maybe something will either happen to the nanny or the son, and they're not going to need to be rescued, and he's going to be able to assemble his team and rescue them from the mountain. So in this category, again, I have two single parent romances that are my favourites. I'm not going to linger too long on the first one, which is Heartless by Elsie Silver. Now this is book 2 in the Chestnut Spring series, and we're following Cade and Willa. Now Cade has a son, his name is Luke, and he needs a nanny for the summer basically, and he employs Willa, very reluctantly, he employs Willa to become his nanny, and she's going to be a live-in nanny, so now they're going to be in close proximity together. Now Cade is very, very grumpy. Willa is definitely a sunshine. She is very, very feisty character as well. Is not going to take any shit from Cade whatsoever, but she has a fantastic relationship with Cade's son. Their chemistry is off the charts, and although Cade is going to absolutely attempt to resist temptation, he is not going to be able to, and it's not too long before they basically get together. So I absolutely love this one. Like I say, I know lots of people have talked about this one before as well. Absolutely worth every star it's been given, and worth all of the hype. A more recent read though that I really wanted to share is The Takeover by T L Swan. I really did enjoy this one. So I believe this is book 2 in the Miles High Club. This is the only book that I've read in this particular series, but we are following single mum Claire, and she's got 3 boys. She was married for a long time. Her boys age in range, you know, one is almost 18, the other one's a teenager. I think the youngest is something like 10 or something like that, but unfortunately her husband died in a car accident, and so she has been a single mum for the last 5 years. Now she's also been desperately trying to hold on to her husband's business, because she really wants to be able to, you know, pass that on to the sons when they are old enough, but it's a media company and it's really struggling, and so this is where Tristan Miles comes in. He is a takeover king because his family are billionaires basically, and they own a much larger media corporation, and his job is mergers and acquisitions, and he decides that Claire's company will be a fantastic one to pick up. And of course in the early part of this book he approaches her and offers to buy her company, of which she very unpolitely declines his offer, and he's so intrigued by her and her determination that he asks her out on a date, and she again takes great delight in telling him absolutely not no. And then several months pass before they see each other again, and the next time they're going to see each other again is at a works conference in France, where they get to spend a couple of days together. She is gone as a delegate, he is there as a speaker, but they are not going to be able to resist each other, and spend a weekend together in Paris. At the end of that weekend, Claire definitely assumes they're going to go their separate ways. Tristan does not belong in her world. She's basically a single mum trying to bring up 3 boys, trying to keep a company afloat, and all the chaos that kind of brings. But Tristan is not going to take no for an answer, and he's going to pursue her relentlessly until he absolutely gets what he wants. And it's fantastic to see how he, you know, weaves his way into their lives, how he basically takes the boys under his wing, and not only falls in love with Claire but with her children as well. And so I absolutely loved this one. Like I said, a recent read and would highly recommend. Next up then we have Grumpy Sunshine, and the first one I've got to talk about is Because of You by Amelia Finn. This is book 1 in the Survivor series. This is kind of a spin-off series to her original series, the Rolling On series, of which there are 6 books. Then she wrote the Survivor series, and after that she wrote the Checkmate series. So a lot of her books and her worlds are interconnected with each other, but you don't need to read them all in order to kind of get the full benefit of them. So like I say, this is book 1 in her second series, the Survivor series, and this one we're following Alex, who is the chief of police, and Juliette, who is a local lawyer. So this is also a romantic suspense. It's a bit of a whodunit, because basically Alex is trying to track down a criminal, and Juliette is basically going to help him from a legal perspective as well to do this. So they end up having to team up to figure out who is committing these acts of violence. I can't remember if it's kind of like a serial killer or if it's something else, but basically obviously as they start to you know, dig into this and investigate more, they are going to potentially be in danger themselves. But Alex is definitely the grump. He's very sort of stoic, very, very serious. And although Juliette is a lawyer, she, you know, presses all of his buttons and really kind of like, you know, brings him out of his shell. You know, what they say about opposites attract. So I think one of my favourite Grumpy Sunshines that I've read is A Deal with the Devil by Elizabeth O'Rourke, and this one is book 1 in the Grumpy Devils series. This is a workplace romance, it's enemies to lovers, and it's also a rom-com as well, and we are following Tarly and Hayes. Now Hayes is living in the US, but he's British. He is a plastic surgeon, and he's a plastic surgeon to the stars. So he is very, very wealthy as well, and lives in a very nice house. He's also a very attractive man himself, but he's a bit of a man about town. He is very commitment shy, and instead prefers, you know, just to have one-night stands with women, will only go on one date, doesn't commit to long-term relationships, and never rings a woman twice. Meanwhile, we have Tarly. Now, Tarly is a struggling author. She's got a tight deadline. She needs to finish her book, but she has got writer's block and she is struggling to finish it. And she knows that if she doesn't at least submit something to her editor very soon, she's not going to get a paycheck and she's going to really struggle to pay her bills. And so she gets an opportunity to go and work for Hayes as his personal assistant when her best friend needs to go on an extended holiday, basically, he's really struggled to find another personal assistant who'll put up with him, because he's very, very difficult to work for because he's so grumpy and makes his assistants do some outrageous things. So like I say, his current personal assistant pleads with his friend Tarly, please, will you be Hayes' personal assistant for the summer? He'll pay you really well, because I really need this holiday. And eventually she agrees, but already they get off on the bad foot because Tarly really doesn't have any good thoughts about Hayes whatsoever. And some of the things he gets his personal assistants to do are things like, you know, make sure that his conquests are removed from his property in the morning, sending them flowers to apologise, rearranging dates. And one of the first tasks he has to do is decide which person he's going to date, because he's double booked himself and she needs to let one of them down gently. Tarly deals with this in some hilarious ways. Some of the conversations she has with Hayes are extremely humorous and funny. I just love the humour in this one, love the banter between these two, and as they get to know each other more, obviously she's going to peel some layers away from Hayes and realise he's not as bad as she first thought he was, you know, they're really going to start to get under each other's skin, and they're going to really form this friendship. But also they have great chemistry together as well. So yeah, overall I just remember smiling throughout this one, gave it 5 stars, would definitely recommend it as a Grumpy Sunshine. Next up we have forced proximity or close proximity books. I've already talked about a couple already that are forced proximity. The first one that I read, I talked about this quite a lot, is Dark Bush and Angel by Odette Stone. This is book 1 in the Vancouver Mafia series, and we're following Andrusha and Olivia, and basically this one is a mafia romance. It's Russian mafia, and she's basically a witness to a crime. So at the start of this book, she is a dancer in a club. After work, she is leaving work and she's in the car park and she witnesses a crime. The person who's committed the crime is head of a mafia organisation. The police have been trying to get something on him for a while, and so she goes into temporary witness protection while they wait for this case to go to trial, and she is the key witness basically that's going to put this mafia guy away. Of course, he's not going to sit idly back and wait to be put in prison, and so he is going to do everything he can to try and track her down and kill her. And of course she's going to be protected by some dodgy cops. So there's several instances where there's an attempt on her life, and Andrusha is sitting back and watching all of this. So Andrusha is not the criminal. He is head of a criminal organisation, but a separate one to you know, the guy who's in trouble, and instead what he decides he's going to do is he realises that Olivia is in danger, that the cops aren't going to protect her, and he really wants this other guy to go away because it obviously will then eliminate his competition. So what he decides to do is kidnap Olivia for himself, and keep her locked in his apartment, so that he can keep her safe until this case can go to trial and she can basically be the witness for this for this crime. And so of course then, though they are in close proximity together because they're pretty much living together, and it's not going to be too long before Andrusha and Olivia take their relationship further. So I really did enjoy that one, and as I've talked about before, that was also the start of my love for mafia romances as well. So in terms of my favourite close proximity romance or forced proximity romance, it would be very remiss of me if I didn't talk about this book here, and this series as a whole, in fact, Cage of Ice and Echoes. So this is book 2 in the Frozen Fate trilogy. Now, this whole series could be described as forced proximity, close proximity, particularly books 1 and 2. But I'm picking out this book here because when I was thinking about sort of forced proximity, close proximity, I don't think I've ever read a book where these characters are so totally not only forced into proximity together, but also so completely reliant on each other. This is a book about a number of characters. This is a why choose kind of reverse harem, if you like, romance, but it's also a very dark romance. I've spoken about this before. I've also got some deep dive reviews on each of the books in this series as well. I'll put the links to those below. Basically though, we are following the main female character, Frankie. She, at the start of book 1, she is married to a billionaire, but then she is kidnapped by a man called Denver and taken to a very remote part of Alaska. When she gets to Alaska, there are 3 additional men there, Cody, Leonid and Wolfson, and basically she is just forced to be with them. And in that book we figure out, you know, who she is, why she's there, who Denver is, who these other men are, and how they're all related. And like I said, it's got very, very dark themes. By the time we get to this second book, Cage of Ice and Echoes, which I really want to talk about today, we are mainly following Frankie, Leonid and Cody, who are kind of left together in this situation where they're completely trapped in this barren kind of wasteland. They are left with very, very limited food and resources, very limited ways to, you know, keep themselves warm, and they are very much forced to work together to figure out how they are not only going to survive but also escape this place that they're in. And so I feel like this is the ultimate, you know, not only dark romance, survival romance, but also this sense of being absolutely forced into close proximity together, because there's literally no way out. There's nowhere for them to go. They have to be together. They have to work together, but they're also in this kind of very, you know, forbidding and frightening sort of landscape, and have to use every single survival skill they have, every single, you know, intelligent thought in their brain, in order to figure out how they're going to get out of here. And yeah, I absolutely love this whole series, but from a close proximity, forced proximity perspective, I don't think you're going to get any closer than this particular one, so would definitely recommend. So for my last trope today, I've got workplace romances, and the first book I recorded reading in this category is Second Semester by QB Tyler. This is just a novella and it's book 2 in the Campus Tales series. We are following Landon and Serena. Now this also is an age gap story. It's also a dad's best friend, but like I say, this is also a workplace romance because he's a lawyer in a law firm and she is basically working for him as his intern for the summer. Now this is a QB Tyler, like I said, it's just novella length, so it's very short, fun, steamy sort of read. Obviously taboo because of the age gap, but also the fact that it's the you know, the dad's best friend, yeah, there's not much more I can say about that. A very fun and enjoyable read. So in terms of my favourite workplace romance, I want to talk about Fall Into You by J.T. Geisinger. This is book 2 in her Morally Grey series, and we're following Cole and Shay. Now Cole is the CFO of his family's company. He is a billionaire, and he, like I say, he's the finance guy during the day, but has a very dark hobby in the evening, shall we say. So he is very much a tortured, dark sort of hero, but also underneath it a great guy as well, of course. At the start of this book, Cole meets Shay, our heroine, in kind of in a bar, She goes to this bar, I think she's with friends, and she happens to see this very mysterious, very handsome man sitting alone in the corner of this bar, and she goes over to speak to him, proposition him, and they have some great banter, and they end up going back to Cole's room and spending an amazing time together, and they kind of agree that that's all it's going to be, and they kind of go their separate ways. Wind on then a month when she starts her new job as a personal assistant to the CFO of this company, and who should be her new boss but Cole. Now he is extremely grumpy about this, probably another great example of a grumpy sunshine. He's very, very grumpy about this. He's not happy at all that she's gone to work for him, because he is still really, really attracted to her, and now, you know, nothing can happen between them because she kind of works for him, and so he kind of is a bit of a dick to start off with. But of course they've got some great chemistry, they can't stay away from each other, and little by little, you know, the banter kind of continues. They start sending messages to each other through the you know, the mail system in the offices, and eventually they are going to spend some more nights together. Of course he's still going to keep her at arm's length, because he's not going to want her to find out about this hobby he has in the evening, shall we say. But it's not too long before she starts to figure things out. I really did love this one. I love JT Geisinger's writing. I love the banter between her couples and the chemistry between her couples. I think her sex scenes are amazing, and this one didn't disappoint, and had a very interesting ending as well. And I cannot wait for the third book in the series to come out, which hopefully will be out at the end of October. So there we are, that is 8 tropes that I wanted to talk about today, and I talked about my first and favourite in each of those categories. And like I said, if you've got any more tropes that you want me to talk about, any more specific ones or any more niche ones, then please pop those in the comments down below, and I'll see about compiling part 2 of this first and favourites tropes video. In the meantime, as always, if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Remember to subscribe to the channel if you want to see more content from me. And all that's left to do is to say thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye. So this is book 2 in the fated. So in terms of my favourite, we have got an imposter here. You gonna say hello, Hanzo? Right, it's my cat. He's come for a little visit. He's gone now. You might hear him padding around. So I think one of my favourite grumpy sunshine, and they get all on so well, and it's not going to be long before their chemistry is irresistible. Their chemistry, and then we have Tess, who basically is hired to be now it's enemies to lovers, because Julian, I've just shipped them.